The Chola dynasty or the Chola empire is one that scaled heights in architecture, naval and military might, in the public policy and their urban planning, their patronage of the arts and religion. So they provide a very fascinating topic for conversation. There are not too many people who are better guides for us as we have this conversation than our guest today, the Jeysundhar. Jeysundhar is an officer of the Indian Foreign Services, stationed currently in Minsk in Belarus. He is also somebody who is extremely passionate about and deeply learned in Indian history, Indian art, and religion, and multiple allied fields. And he's somebody who's really good at pulling the picture together by taking parts of the puzzle from various sort of primary sources and telling a very compelling story. So, this is a topic that I am really keen to learn more about, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation, Jay. So, thanks a lot for joining us.
Varun, thank you so much for that generous introduction and also for having me over here. It's totally my pleasure and privilege to be part of Bharat Varta Talks on a topic that is not just close to my heart, but as you pointed out, is also very relevant and has remained relevant for over a millennium.
Absolutely, absolutely. To start off with, I mean, the temples themselves, I mean, remain a very tangible, lasting legacy of the rule. What makes these temples special and stand out? So, of course, anybody who's been to Tanjavur and seen the Brihadishwara temple can't not have that impact. But what is it about the architecture, about the way it was built, that makes them unique and stand apart?
Okay, so if you were to look at the temples, you would see that the legacy of Chola temples does not begin with the Brihadishwara temple, which, by the way, Rajaraja calls as Rajarajeshwaram. The term Brihadishwara is a later day coinage which has stuck around primarily because it seems more appropriate to call a temple of that magnitude as Brihadishwara. And subsequently, the lingam of that scale automatically becomes Brihadishwara. But originally, when Rajaraja builds the temple, it is called Rajarajeshwaram after his own name. Now, architecture of Chola temples, early Chola temples are more or less a continuation of later day Pallava temples. Now, the temples themselves originate as smaller units built with, like I said, less permanent materials such as brick and mortar. Okay. Now, Mahendra Varma Pallavan praises himself as somebody who has managed to build a temple without using brick, metal, or wood, which means he built it with stone. Okay. Now, less than 2 centuries after Mahendra Pallavan, building stone temples becomes commonplace. That is how fast the evolution has happened. Also, because building on stone needs a higher level of skill because of the nature of the material itself. It needs, and because you go on to embellish the stone more and more in terms of the decorations that you do, in terms of the sculptures that you place on stone, it becomes significantly difficult to do and needs a higher order level of skill, which is what is built during these centuries, the couple of centuries after Mahendra Pallavan, and it reaches its zenith under the Cholas. And if you were to go look at it, some of the earlier Chola temples, such as the Mover Koil, or the temples that you would have with the three temples that are placed together. This is built by the Kodumbalur clan, which is a feudatory under the Cholas. However, when Rajaraja is building the Brihadishwara temple, he does not take inspiration from something his predecessors have built. His predecessors, as in those Cholas who preceded him, have built. His inspiration comes from a temple that the Pallavas have built. He takes the Kailasanatha temple in Kanchipuram as his inspiration. So essentially what he does is he takes the Kailasanatha temple, and if you were to do it on an iPad, he zooms it out. So he super scales the Kailasanatha temple, and the Vimana that you would see in Brihadishwara is structurally similar to the Kailasanatha temple Vimana, just scaled to 13 levels. And the temple itself is built in a scale that is unprecedented, not just in terms of vertical growth, but also horizontal. To the extent that the walls are so long on either side that Rajaraja chooses to build them at two levels. Because when you go to the Brihadishwara temple and you see the Dwarapalakas themselves, the Dwarapalakas are like more than life size. So every time, when by the time the Brihadishwara temple is being built, Rajaraja has already been the ruler for about 20 years. He has had a series of victories. And this forms part of the names given to the Gopuram. The entrance Gopurams that you have a Keralantakan Tiruvasal, and then you move ahead into the temple. So the point is, by this time, Rajaraja has already defeated the Cheras, and he has, won over Kerala. And this finds reflection in the temple that he builds. To the extent that when Rajaraja, like, you don't just build the temple and forget about it. This is not how the Cholas operate, or any king operated at that point of time. They build the temple and they make a series of grants, endowments, donations, etc. for the maintenance and sustenance of that temple. So when Rajaraja builds the Brihadishwara, or Rajarajeshwara as he called it, he makes an endowment that includes villages not just from Chola Mandalam, which is the directly ruled Chola territory, but also from the conquered territories. So there are villages from southern Karnataka as well as northern Sri Lanka. Imagine this, a village from Sri Lanka from where there comes a contribution to fund the sustenance of the temple in Tanjavur. This not only is a sign of how Rajaraja operates, but also a sign of the fact that the Chola state was extremely centralized. That the control of the king sitting in Tanjavur throughout the territory, not just the core territory, but also the conquered territories, was complete. Because if these territories continued to be under the feudatories, the king would not have had the authority to make a grant that involved these villages. But that is what Rajaraja is able to do. And this continues along. So when Rajaraja builds this temple, I would rather not get into the technical aspects of the architecture, because there has been spoken about it. I would like to talk about the grants made and how that reflects the time and society of contemporary of Rajaraja. So he builds this temple. He also makes grants and donations to several other temples. And this temple is a sign of how prosperous and how much of a revenue producing machine that the Chola state had become at this point. Because the scale was not one that was imagined by his predecessors. And how was Rajaraja able to achieve it? Because early in his reign, he brings about a series of administrative reforms. He correctly identifies that it's in an agrarian society, land revenue is the main source of income. And in order to maximize your land revenue, you either bleed your people to death, which is what you would see in some other states ruled by some other rulers, or you expand cultivation, you increase the output of the field, and thereby maximize your revenue. So which is what Rajaraja does. To begin with, he conducts some large-scale land survey. Now, Rajaraja is one of the first Chola rulers to conduct a land survey of this scale.
And at this point, what was the span of the Cholas' rule? So you mentioned until Sri Lanka as well.
Yeah.
So when the temple was built, at this point, how large was the territory?
He controls parts of southern Karnataka through partly friendship and partly marital relations. He also has great relations with what we now know as the Eastern Chalukya territory, being ruled out of Vengi, or the Vengi Chalukyas. So Rajaraja's daughter, also named after his sister Kundavai, is married to Vimaladitya of the Eastern Chalukyas. At this point, Vimaladitya is a prince, and he eventually succeeds to become the ruler. And because of this marital relations, Rajaraja has, to some extent, you could say that the policies, or the external policies, the foreign policy of the Eastern Chalukyas was fully aligned with that of the Cholas. So what Rajaraja essentially manages to do is that he sees that there is a wedge between the Western Chalukyas and the Eastern Chalukyas. The Western Chalukyas at this point ruling out of Kalyani. So he sees this wedge and he drives it further in, and he manages to capitalize on that by establishing relationship with the Eastern Chalukyas so that the two of them could counter the Western Chalukyas. And to answer your question, yes, he controls part of southern Karnataka and also parts of the Eastern Chalukya Empire as well as northern Sri Lanka. And after his one of his earliest victories is in Kandalur Salai. because his Kirti, and this is another reform of Rajaraja, by the way, unlike his predecessors who speak about their ancestry and where they are originated from, Rajaraja does that. He does that, and then he also speaks about his conquests. And this model is appreciated sufficiently enough that all his successors, all of Rajaraja's successors, follow the same model in what is known as their Kirti. So the first part of the inscription that talks about who the ruler is, that's how we are able to understand that this inscription is from this king or in this king's reign. Because they put it there not only with their title, which is Rajakesari or Parakesari, which happens on an alternate basis, but also they enter the conquest that they have made. So Rajaraja's first conquest is that of Kandalur Salai, which is identified as a port in southern Kerala. So he launches an expedition against Kandalur Salai and he destroys a lot of ships there. Based on that, we get the information that he has also conquered Kerala. And towards the end of his reign, one of the final conquests of Rajaraja is the islands of Lakshadweep and Maldives. Why does he do that? And this is important because this is yet another aspect of the Chola kingdom, in the sense that their support to trade. Maritime trade, not just land-based trade, but also maritime trade. In order to secure the lanes of shipping, as we would call it in today's context, in order to secure the lanes of shipping against piracy, Rajaraja conquests the Lakshadweep and Maldives because pirates located in those islands at that point of time disrupted the trade that the Cholas, or rather the mercantile guilds in the Chola Empire, were conducting. You have a contemporary Jewish merchant, his name is Benjamin. He records that at this point, the port of Kish, which is located in Iran now, the port of Kish or from the port of Kish, it was 17-day journey to the port of Cholam, or it would have been most likely a port in the Chola Empire on the western coast. So that is the extent of the Chola trade. It goes all the way up to Kish in Iran on the western side, and it goes all the way up to China on the eastern side. And in order to secure those shipping lanes, Rajaraja conquers the Lakshadweep and the Maldives Islands. So that is the extent of his empire towards the end of his reign.
And when it comes to the naval aspect of the Cholas, I mean, was that a precursor in Indian history, or were the Cholas paving the way in this? And both later, I think, under Rajendra's reign, or while Rajendra was the regent to Rajaraja, right, the Southeast Asia expeditions and so on, where does that stand in Indian history in terms of naval relations and the trade routes across the sea? How would you look at it in history?
Okay, so this is an important point here where we see bigger ships being built, or rather ships designed for longer voyages. Okay, so if you were to look at if you were to zoom out and look at the larger picture of the trade scene, you have just before Rajaraja's time, you have the Tang dynasty in China, and you have the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad. Now, that's on the west. On the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad is on the western extreme of this trade line, and on the eastern extreme of this trade line, you have the Tang dynasty in China. And we are talking about a maritime trade route. And just in between these two extremes, you have in the southern peninsula of India, you have the Cholas, and then in Southeast Asia, you have the Sri Vijaya Empire. So at this significant point in time where ships are being designed for longer voyages and trade volumes increase, there is a conflict between these two, the Cholas and the Sri Vijayas, on who gets to hegemonize the trade route. Okay, now the Cholas through this time have continued to patronize the mercantile guilds in their territory. We have references of several mercantile guilds, be it the Manigramam, which is an older guild, and then you have Anjuvannam, which is most likely composed of merchants of various nationalities. You have Jewish merchants, you have Persian merchants, and all these are part of the Anjuvannam guild. And then you have the guild that later goes on to become the umbrella covering all these guilds. This is the Nana Desathu Disayayaraithu Ainutruvar, or the group of 500 from several countries and 1,000 directions. I mean, the name itself tells you where they come from and how far their reach is. Okay, so it's Nana Desathu, or from several countries, Disayayaraithu, from 1,000 dishas or directions, Ainutruvar, the group of 500. So these mercantile groups receive strong patronage from the Chola state. partly because you could say that the Chola state exerted control over the maritime trade in the sense that it brought them good revenue. Because we see duties being mentioned, customs, octroi duties being mentioned that bring revenue to the kingdom. And when these guilds face issues with respect to the trade, or when there are other factors playing in to affect the level of control that the Cholas would like to have, in the sense that you have both the Cholas as well as the Sri Vijaya sending trade missions to China, which during the time of Rajaraja is under the Song dynasty. Now, as soon as the Song dynasty comes to power in China, this is early in Rajaraja's time, which is the second half of the 10th century. As soon as the Song dynasty comes to power, it sends trade missions to other countries, encouraging their traders to come sell in China. And this is an opportunity that is grabbed onto by all the kingdoms of the region. And also at this time, the Abbasid Caliphate is succeeded by the Fatimid Caliphate in Egypt. And because of all these changes, the Cholas sitting here under the reign of Rajaraja decide to seize this opportunity. So both Rajaraja and Rajendra sent trade missions to China. However, there is proof that there is evidence that shows that the Chinese were not fully aware of or able to grasp the control or the power of the Chola Empire. They treat them as a sort of a lesser kingdom or as a sort of a feudatory. And it is in this light that we have Rajendra Chola's famous Kadaram expedition. Okay, so this happens, we are nearing the 1000th anniversary of this Kadaram expedition, which comes in 2 years, 1025. So we are about to hit 2025. We are nearing the 1000th anniversary of this expedition. So Rajendra's inscription says that he launched several ships, okay, across the waves of the ocean. And he captured 14, he attacked 14 cities of the Sri Vijaya Empire. The names of these 14 cities are mentioned. Most of them have been identified with the present cities that are in that place. And he defeats the kingdom. He brings back a lot of wealth. But more importantly, after this, the Chola merchants do not face any, or the mercantile guilds of the Chola Empire do not face any trouble transiting through the Straits of Malacca on their way to China. So it is essentially the sword carrying forward the flag of the merchant guilds. So a maritime policy that not only secures your political control over the sea lanes, but also enables your merchants to cross those lanes without fear or without being penalized by the customs duties of the kingdoms that are on the route. So if you were to see the maritime policy that the Cholas adopted, it was a combination of both securing political control and prestige for themselves, and more importantly, a utilitarian policy that would enable greater trade.
And for how long did this last post time period of Rajendra Chola and so on? So did this sort of dissipate over a period of time? I mean, what was the postscript of these expeditions?
So Rajendra Chola conducts a very successful expedition of Kadaram. Post that, we have evidence of his.
Kadaram is modern day Malaysia, is it right?
It's a place called Kedah in the Malay Peninsula. Yes. And Sri Vijaya
And
is
Rajendra is also called Kadaram Kondashoran.
Yes, he takes on the title Kadaram Kondan. He is also the Gange Kondan as well as the Kadaram Kondan. So what you have is after Rajendra Chola's expedition in 1025 CE, after his lifetime, after his sons succeed him, his youngest son Veera Rajendra succeeds him eventually. And we have evidence of Veera Rajendra himself conducting an expedition in Kadaram. However, this expedition is not to conquer territory. By this time, the Cholas are so deeply enmeshed in the politics of Kadaram that when there is a succession battle in that kingdom, it is the Cholas who are requested to intervene. And it is Veera Rajendra whose expedition goes into settle things in Kadaram for the rulers of the day there. We have proof of Kulotunga I, who succeeds who subsequently a successor of Veera Rajendra, who also has sent an expedition or a trade mission to China that passes through Kadaram. So this is the extent of their involvement. Yes, after Kulotunga's time, we don't really have much of a picture of Chola involvement in Kadaram. So we can say that Rajendra Chola's campaign lasted at least Another half century of control for the Cholas in the affairs of the Sri Vijaya.
And the empires that ruled the the coasts of the peninsula and so on, South India, post that, what is the legacy in terms of maritime trade and so on that we see post the Cholas over the last 1,000 years?
Okay, to see post Cholas, let's first try to establish the level of control that the Cholas had on the coastline. Okay, so soon after coming to power, like I said, Rajaraja conquers Kerala. So he has control over the ports on the southwestern coast of the peninsula. A little further now north, you have the Western Chalukyas and so on. But the southern tip of the peninsula on the western coast, Raja has control. Okay, and on the eastern coast, because of his marital relations with the eastern Chalukyas, you have control up to Vengi. But then comes Rajendra, who launches a northern expedition. So this is the famous Ganga expedition of Rajendra, which goes all the way up to Bengal, defeats the feudatories of the Palas and subsequently the Palas themselves. Okay. Now, this is something interesting. It is a slight detour from what we were talking about. Now, Rajaraja's expedition to Sri Lanka in inscriptions is poetically compared with Rama crossing the ocean to go to Sri Lanka. Okay. Now, similarly, Rajendra bringing back the waters of the Ganga from Bengal is compared in its inscriptions with what Bhagirath did by bringing the Ganga to earth. So this is how the writers of these inscriptions glorify their respective patrons. Now, it is after this that Rajendra builds the Gangaikonda Cholapuram. But more importantly, after these campaigns, the Cholas have control over the ports on the southwestern coast, completely on the eastern coast, as well as the northern Sri Lankan ports. And this is not a unique phenomenon in the sense that ports and maritime trade have always been a forte in the empires in Tamil Nadu. Even from the Sangam age, you have Kaveri Pumpatnam under Karikala, which was the port at that point of time. You have Mamallapuram or Mahabalipuram under the Pallavas. And you have the Korkai port of the Pandyas. And subsequently, you have Nagapatnam, which acquires a great amount of importance under the Cholas because of the amount of or the volume of trade that passes through Nagapatnam during Rajendra's time. And it is also from Nagapatnam that he is most likely to have launched his Kadaram expedition. And therefore, what happens is these Chola rulers, Rajaraja and Rajendra, realize the importance of both ports as well as the sea lanes of communication. And the importance of that, not just for trade, but also for the economy of the country. And it is through this realization that they adopt an aggressive and forward-looking maritime policy that goes on to secure control of these ports for the Chola Empire.